David was having a terrible week. His boss had rejected his latest project design. His car had broken down, and his dating life was basically non-existent. So when his friend Jake invited him to a birthday party, David almost said no. He wasn't in the mood for small talk and fake smiles. But Jake insisted, and David figured he had nothing better to do on a Saturday night. The party was at a rooftop bar downtown. David grabbed a drink and found a quiet corner, watching people laugh and dance. He was thinking about leaving early when she walked up to him. She had shoulder-length brown hair and wore a simple black dress, but there was something about her smile that made David forget about his bad week entirely. "You look like you're having as much fun as I am," she said, nodding toward the crowd. "I'm Lisa. By the way, I work with the birthday girl." "David," he replied, surprised by how easy it was to talk to her. "And yeah, parties aren't really my thing." "Mine either," Lisa laughed. "Want to grab some fresh air on the balcony? It's pretty crazy in here." They talked for 3 hours straight. David learned that Lisa worked in marketing, loved old movies, and had a dog named Buddy. She asked about his work as a graphic designer and seemed genuinely interested in his answers. She laughed at his jokes, even the bad ones, and remembered every detail he shared when he mentioned he was stressed about a project. She gave him her full attention and offered thoughtful advice. "You know, most people don't really listen when someone talks," Lisa said as they stood by the railing, looking out at the city lights. "They're just waiting for their turn to speak. But you're different. You actually hear what I'm saying." David felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time. Lisa made him feel important, interesting, like he mattered. When the party ended, she asked for his number, and David practically floated home. The next morning, David woke up to a text from Lisa. "Thanks for such a great conversation last night. Hope you have a wonderful day." Throughout the day, she sent him funny memes, asked about his weekend plans, and remembered to ask how his work project went. David found himself checking his phone, constantly excited for her next message. Their first official date was at a small Italian restaurant. Lisa arrived 15 minutes early and had already ordered his favorite wine. Somehow she remembered him mentioning it at the party. She looked beautiful, and David felt lucky to be sitting across from her. During dinner, she hung on every word. He said and shared stories about her own life. She was funny, smart, and incredibly attentive. "I have to admit something," Lisa said over dessert. "I've been looking forward to this all week." I couldn't stop thinking about our conversation at the party. David smiled. "Me too. I haven't felt this excited about someone in a long time." After dinner, they walked through the park, talking about everything and nothing. Lisa linked her arm through his, and David felt like he was in a romantic movie. When he dropped her off at her apartment, she kissed him goodnight, a soft, sweet kiss that made his heart race. The next few weeks were like a dream. Lisa texted him good morning every day and good night every evening. She wanted to know about his work, his friends, his family. She remembered his coffee order, his favorite TV shows, and the names of his coworkers. David had never felt so seen and appreciated by anyone. Lisa started joining him for lunch during his work breaks. She would show up at his office with sandwiches and a bright smile. Making his coworkers a little jealous, she planned thoughtful date nights, surprised him with small gifts, and made him feel like the center of her world. "You're amazing," David told her one evening as they cuddled on his couch. "I've never met anyone who pays attention to me like you do." Lisa snuggled closer. "That's because you're worth paying attention to. I just want to make you happy." David's friends loved Lisa at first. She was charming and friendly when they all went out together. She complimented their girlfriends, laughed at their jokes, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know them. But David noticed she always wanted to sit next to him, hold his hand, and include herself in every conversation he had. "She's really into you," his friend Mike commented after a group dinner. "Like, really into you. Is that a bad thing?" David asked, feeling defensive. "No, man, it's great, just intense. You know, she watches your every move." David brushed Off Mike's comment. He thought his friend was just jealous. After all, Mike had been single for months and probably wasn't used to seeing someone so devoted in a relationship. As weeks turned into months, Lisa's attention became even more focused. She wanted to spend every free moment together. If David mentioned he was tired after work, she would offer to cook dinner. If he had a bad day, she would drop everything to comfort him. She started leaving little notes in his jacket pockets and surprising him with his favorite snacks. "I just love taking care of you," Lisa would say. "It makes me happy when you're happy." David felt special and loved in a way he had never experienced. Lisa made him feel like he was the most important person in the world. She listened to his problems, celebrated his successes, and seemed to live for his approval and attention. But there were small moments that made David pause. Like when Lisa got upset because he didn't respond to her text for 2 hours during a work meeting, or when she seemed hurt that he wanted to grab drinks with his coworkers without her. She never got angry. She just looked sad and disappointed, which somehow made David feel worse than if she had yelled, "I'm sorry." She would say with tears in her eyes, "I know I'm being silly. I just miss you when we're apart." David would always end up apologizing and reassuring her. He didn't want to hurt her feelings, and her sadness made him feel guilty. Lisa was so loving and devoted. The least he could do was be understanding about her feelings. Looking back, David realized this was where everything started. He was so grateful for Lisa's attention and love that he didn't recognize the early signs of something unhealthy. He thought he had found someone who truly cared about him. He had no idea that he was about to become the center of someone's entire world in a way that would change both of their lives forever. All he knew was that for the first time in his life, someone made him feel completely wanted and needed, and that feeling was intoxicating. 6 months into their relationship, David thought he had everything figured out. He and Lisa were officially a couple, and she had practically moved into his apartment. Her toothbrush sat next to his, her clothes filled half his closet, and her favorite coffee creamer had a permanent spot in his fridge. David loved having her around so much, but lately, something felt different. It started small. Lisa began asking more questions about his day, wanting to know every detail about his conversations with coworkers. She would sit on his couch while he worked on freelance projects, just watching him design logos and websites. At first, David thought it was sweet that she was so interested in his work. "Tell me about this project," Lisa would say, curling up next to him. "Who's the client? What did they say in the meeting?" David would explain everything, and Lisa would listen with the same focused attention she had always given him. But then, she started asking follow-up questions that felt strange. "Is that new girl in accounting still helping with the project?" She would ask casually. "She seems really friendly with you, Amy." "She's just doing her job, Lisa. We barely talk outside of work stuff." Lisa would nod and smile, but David noticed she remembered Amy's name and brought her up in conversations weeks later. It was like Lisa was keeping track of every woman David mentioned. No matter how briefly, the questions extended to his friends, too. When David mentioned grabbing lunch with his buddy Tom, Lisa wanted to know who else was there, what they talked about, and how long they hung out. She never seemed satisfied with simple answers. "You were gone for 2 hours, Lisa would say, checking her phone. "That's a long lunch. We just got caught up talking. You know how it is." Lisa would look hurt, like David had somehow disappointed her. "I just worry when you're gone longer than expected." "I was starting to think something happened to you." David felt guilty for making her worry. He started texting Lisa updates throughout the day, letting her know where he was and when he would be home. It seemed like the caring thing to do, and Lisa was always so appreciative of his messages. But the texting became more frequent. Lisa would send him good morning texts, lunch check-ins, afternoon updates, and good night messages. She wanted to know what he was doing, who he was with, and when he would be free to talk. David found himself responding immediately because he knew Lisa would worry if he did in single quotes T. One evening, David was having dinner with his sister Jessica when his phone buzzed with a text from Lisa. Then another, and another. Jessica watched as David typed responses between bites of food. "Everything okay?" Jessica asked. "Yeah." "Lisa just wants to know when I'll be home," David said, sending another quick text. His phone buzzed again. This time, Lisa was asking who he was with and sending him a photo of the dinner she had made for him at home. "David, you're on a family dinner," Jessica said gently. "Can't this wait?" David looked at his phone, then at his sister. He realized he had been more focused on texting Lisa than talking to Jessica. "You're right. Let me just tell her I'll call her later." But when David tried to put his phone away, it kept buzzing. Lisa was sending messages about missing him and feeling lonely at his apartment. She sent photos of herself looking sad on his couch. David felt torn between enjoying time with his sister and responding to Lisa's messages. The pattern continued with his friends. During a guy's night out, Lisa would text constantly, asking when he would be home and saying she missed him. David started leaving events early to avoid the flood of messages, telling his friends he was tired or had an early morning. "You used to be the last one to leave," his friend Mike pointed out one night. "Now you're always rushing home. Lisa just likes spending time together," David explained. "She gets lonely when I'm out late." Mike raised an eyebrow. "Dude, you're allowed to have friends. She should understand that." David felt defensive. "She does understand. She's used to us spending evenings together. It's sweet that she misses me." But David was starting to feel the pressure. Lisa's expectations seemed to grow every week. She wanted to know about every conversation he had, every person he interacted with, and every plan he made. She would get quiet and sad when he mentioned doing things without her. Even simple things like going to the grocery store or getting a haircut. "I could come with you," Lisa would offer. Whenever David mentioned errands, "I don't mind waiting while you get your haircut." David started including Lisa in more activities just to avoid the sad look she got. When he made plans alone, she would come to the barber shop and sit in the waiting area, scroll through her phone while he bought groceries, and even accompany him to work events that spouses typically didn't attend. His coworkers began to notice. Amy from accounting made a joke about Lisa being David's shadow, and his boss mentioned that having girlfriends at work functions was unusual unless it was a special occasion. "She's just supportive," David told them, but he was starting to feel embarrassed. The real problem became clear when David's friend invited him to a weekend camping trip. It was supposed to be a guy's weekend, something they had done every year since college. David was excited and told Lisa about it over dinner. Lisa's face fell immediately. "A whole weekend without me? It's just a guy's trip, babe. We do this every year. Remember, I told you about it before." Lisa pushed her food around her plate, looking genuinely upset. "I know, but that was before we were together. I thought maybe things were different now." David felt that familiar guilt creeping in. Lisa looked so disappointed, and he hated seeing her unhappy. "It's just 2 days. I'll be back Sunday night. I just don't understand why you need to get away from me," Lisa said, her voice breaking slightly. "Are you getting tired of spending time together?" "No, of course not," David said quickly. "It has nothing to do with you. It's just a tradition with the guys." But Lisa continued to look hurt, and David found himself questioning whether the trip was really that important. Lisa had been so loving and supportive. Maybe it was selfish to leave her alone for a whole weekend. The guilt ate at him for days, and eventually, David called his friend and made an excuse about work commitments. Lisa brightened immediately when he told her he was staying home. "Really? You do that for me?" "Of course," David said, though he felt a strange heaviness in his chest. "I'd rather spend the weekend with you anyway." Lisa rewarded him with extra attention and affection, cooking his favorite meals and planning special activities for them to do together. David tried to enjoy it, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. His friends had started making comments about him being whipped or controlled, and David found himself getting defensive about his relationship. The truth was, David was starting to feel trapped, but he couldn't understand why. Lisa loved him, cared about him, and wanted to spend time with him. Wasn't that what a good relationship was supposed to be like? So why did he feel like he was suffocating? He told himself he was being ungrateful. Lisa was devoted to him in a way he had never experienced. She made him feel wanted and needed. But somewhere in the back of his mind, a small voice was starting to whisper that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't what love was supposed to feel like. 1 year into their relationship, David thought he had learned to manage Lisa's needs. He texted her regularly, included her in most of his plans, and tried to be understanding when she got upset about his friendships. But keeping Lisa happy was becoming a full-time job, and David was exhausted. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning at work. David was struggling with a difficult client project when his coworker Rachel stopped by his desk. Rachel worked in the creative department and had always been friendly with everyone in the office. She was married with 2 kids and had never been anything more than a colleague to David. "Hey, I saw your design for the Johnson account," Rachel said, leaning against his desk. "It's really creative. Mind if I ask how you came up with the color scheme?" David was happy to talk about his work. Rachel understood design in a way that Lisa didn't, and it felt good to have a professional conversation. They talked for about 10 minutes about different techniques and software programs. It was the kind of normal workplace interaction David used to have all the time. What David didn't know was that Lisa had decided to surprise him with lunch. She had taken time off work and bought sandwiches from his favorite deli. When she walked into his office building, she saw David and Rachel talking and laughing together. From Lisa's perspective, it looked like David was having an intimate conversation with another woman. Lisa waited in the lobby, watching through the glass doors as David and Rachel continued their conversation. She saw Rachel touch David's arm when she laughed at something he said. She saw David smile in a way that Lisa thought was reserved just for her. By the time Rachel walked away, Lisa had worked herself into a state of panic and anger. David was surprised to see Lisa in the lobby. When he came down for lunch, she was holding a bag of food and had a strange expression on her face. "Hey, what are you doing here?" David asked, giving her a quick kiss. "This is a nice surprise." "Who was that woman you were talking to?" Lisa asked immediately. David was confused. "What woman?" "The one upstairs. I saw you talking to her. She was touching your arm." David realized Lisa meant Rachel. "Oh, that's just Rachel from the creative department. She was asking about a project." "Why?" Lisa's eyes filled with tears. "You were laughing with her. You look so happy." "Lisa, it was just a work conversation. Rachel's married." She was asking about design stuff. But Lisa was getting more upset. "You never told me about her. You talked to me about everyone else at work, but you never mentioned Rachel." David tried to think. Had he mentioned Rachel before? He talked about his coworkers all the time, but he couldn't remember specifically talking about Rachel, because she wasn't really part of his daily work life. "I don't know if I mentioned her or not," David said honestly. "She's just a coworker. There's nothing to tell." This was the wrong answer. Lisa started crying harder. "So you're having conversations with women at work that you don't even tell me about? What else are you hiding from me?" David felt frustrated and confused. "Lisa, I'm not hiding anything. I can't remember every single conversation I have at work. Rachel and I barely talk." "But you were so comfortable with her," Lisa said, her voice getting louder. "She was touching you, and you didn't pull away. You were smiling at her like you smile at me." Other people in the lobby were starting to stare. David felt embarrassed and tried to calm Lisa down. "Can we talk about this somewhere else? People are looking." "I don't care who's looking," Lisa said, but she followed David outside to a quiet corner of the parking lot for the next hour. Lisa grilled David about every interaction he had ever had with Rachel. She wanted to know when they had first met, what they had talked about, and whether David found her attractive. David tried to reassure Lisa, but every answer seemed to make her more upset. "I can't believe you've been having a relationship with another woman and didn't tell me," Lisa said. "It's not a relationship," David said, getting frustrated. "She's a coworker. We've had maybe 5 conversations in the past year, But you enjoy talking to her, Lisa pressed. You were happy when you were talking to her. David didn't know how to answer that. He had enjoyed the conversation with Rachel, but only because it was nice to talk about work with someone who understood design. It wasn't romantic or personal at all. Lisa, you're being unreasonable, David said. I'm allowed to have normal conversations with my coworkers. This made Lisa cry even harder. So now I'm unreasonable. I'm just supposed to be okay with you having secret relationships with other women? They're not secret relationships, David said, raising his voice. They're normal work conversations. The argument continued for another hour. Lisa accused David of being secretive and dishonest. David defended himself, saying he had done nothing wrong. Eventually, Lisa calmed down enough to go back to work. But she made David promise to tell her about every conversation he had with Rachel in the future. That night, Lisa brought up the incident again. She had spent the afternoon thinking about it, and her suspicions had grown stronger. I think you have feelings for her, Lisa said as they sat on David's couch. The way you defended her today, it's like you care more about her feelings than mine. David was exhausted from the earlier argument. Lisa, I don't have feelings for Rachel. I barely know her. But you enjoy her company more than mine, Lisa said. You never look as happy when you're talking to me as you did when you were talking to her. This hurt David because it felt like Lisa was twisting everything. That's not true. I love you. I don't love Rachel. Then why won't you just avoid her? Lisa asked. If she means nothing to you, why can't you just stay away from her? David felt trapped. Because she's my coworker. I can't just ignore her completely. You can if you love me. Lisa said, if you really cared about my feelings, you would find a way to avoid her. Over the next few weeks, David found himself doing exactly that. He would take different routes through the office to avoid walking past Rachel's desk. When she tried to start conversations, he would give short answers and walk away quickly. He felt rude and uncomfortable, but he didn't want to deal with another fight with Lisa. Rachel eventually stopped trying to talk to him. David felt bad about it, but he told himself it was easier this way. Lisa was happier, and David was getting fewer interrogations about his workday. But the Rachel incident had changed something in their relationship. Lisa became more watchful and suspicious. She started asking detailed questions about every person David interacted with during the day. She wanted to know about conversations with store clerks, people in elevators, and anyone who might have looked at him twice. David's friends noticed the change too. He had become quiet and anxious, always checking his phone and worrying about Lisa's reaction to things. When they asked him about it, David would make excuses or change the subject. You don't seem like yourself lately, his friend Mike said one evening. Everything okay with Lisa? David wanted to tell Mike the truth, but he didn't know how to explain it. How could he say that his girlfriend was jealous of his coworkers without sounding like he was complaining about someone who loved him? She just cares about me, David said. Sometimes it's a lot, but it's because she loves me. Mike looked skeptical. Caring about someone doesn't mean controlling who they talk to. David felt defensive. She's not controlling me. She just gets worried sometimes. But deep down, David was starting to wonder if Mike was right. He was walking on eggshells, constantly worried about Lisa's reactions. He had started lying about small things to avoid arguments, and he was losing friendships because Lisa made it too difficult to maintain them. The worst part was that David still loved Lisa. Despite everything, he could see how much she cared about him. When she wasn't upset or suspicious, she was the same loving, attentive person he had fallen for. She cooked his favorite meals, remembered important dates, and made him feel special in ways no one else ever had. But David was beginning to realize that love wasn't supposed to feel this hard. He was starting to wonder if the price of Lisa's devotion was higher than he was willing to pay. 3 months after the Rachel incident, David finally did something he should have done a long time ago. He made an appointment with a therapist. The decision came after another sleepless night. Lying in bed next to Lisa, feeling like he was drowning in his own life, David had never been to therapy before. He thought it was something other people did, people with bigger problems than his. But lately, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong with him. He was angry all the time, snapping at coworkers and avoiding his friends. He felt like he was losing himself, but he couldn't figure out why. Dr. Martinez was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a calm voice. Her office was comfortable and quiet, and for the first time in months, David felt like he could breathe. When she asked him why he had come, David wasn't sure where to start. "I think my girlfriend might be crazy," David said, then immediately felt guilty for saying it. "I mean, she's not crazy. She needs a lot of attention, and I think it's making me crazy." Dr. Martinez nodded and asked David to tell her more about his relationship. David found himself talking for the entire first session, describing Lisa's behavior, their arguments, and how trapped he felt. It was the first time he had said these things out loud to anyone. "How does it feel to be needed so much?" Dr. Martinez asked. David was surprised by the question. "It feels good, I guess. Lisa makes me feel important. She depends on me for everything. And how does that make you feel about yourself?" David thought about it. "Like I'm useful. Like I matter. Lisa can't function without me, and that makes me feel, I don't know, special." Dr. Martinez wrote something in her notebook. "Tell me about your other relationships. How do you feel when you're with your friends or family?" David realized he hadn't thought about his other relationships in months. "I don't really see them much anymore. Lisa gets upset when I make plans without her. So it's easier to just stay home. Easier for who? For both of us, I guess. Lisa doesn't have to worry about what I'm doing, and I don't have to deal with her being upset." Dr. Martinez leaned forward slightly. "David, what do you think Lisa was like before she met you?" The question caught David off guard. "I don't know. She never really talks about her life before we got together. She had friends, I think, but she doesn't see them anymore either. And how do you feel about being Lisa's whole world?" David was quiet for a long moment. "Sometimes it feels like too much pressure. Like if I mess up, her whole life falls apart. But also, it feels good to be that important to someone." Over the next few sessions, Dr. Martinez helped David explore his feelings about the relationship. She asked him about his childhood, his family, and his previous relationships. David started to see patterns he had never noticed before. "I've always been the helper," David realized during one session. "In my family, with my friends. In my past relationships, I'm the one people come to when they need something fixed." "And how does that make you feel?" "Needed, important, like I have a purpose." Dr. Martinez nodded. "What happens when people don't need your help?" David thought about it. "I feel useless. Like I don't matter anymore. So when Lisa needs you constantly, it feeds something inside you." David felt uncomfortable with the question, but he knew it was true. "Yes, I feel important when she depends on me, even when it's exhausting. At least I know I matter to her." Dr. Martinez helped David understand that his need to be needed was just as unhealthy as Lisa's need to control him. David had been attracted to Lisa's intensity because it made him feel valuable and necessary. He had unconsciously encouraged her dependence because it fed his own psychological needs. "You've been getting something out of this relationship too," Dr. Martinez explained. "Lisa's dependence on you makes you feel powerful and important. In a way, you've been addicted to being her addiction." The realization hit David like a punch to the stomach. He had been blaming Lisa for being needy and controlling, but he had been enabling her behavior because it made him feel good about himself. He had stayed in the relationship not just because he loved Lisa, but because her desperation made him feel like a hero. "I've been making it worse," David said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Every time I give in to her demands, I'm teaching her that this behavior works." Dr. Martinez nodded. "It's a cycle. Lisa acts out because she's afraid of losing you, and you respond by trying to fix her feelings. This makes her more dependent on you, which makes you feel more important, which makes her more afraid of losing you." David started to see his relationship with Lisa from a completely different perspective. He realized that he hadn't been the innocent victim he thought he was. He had been an active participant in creating the unhealthy dynamic between them. I thought I was being loving and supportive, David said, but I was actually making her worse. Why do you think you needed to be needed so badly? Dr. Martinez asked. David thought about his childhood. His parents had divorced when he was 12, and his mother had often turned to him for emotional support. He had learned early that being helpful and supportive was how he earned love and attention. In his previous relationships, he had always been the caretaker, the one who fixed problems and made everything better. I thought that's what love was, David said. Taking care of someone, being there for them no matter what. I thought if I could just be supportive enough, Lisa would get better. But what about your own needs? David realized he had no idea what his own needs were. He had been so focused on meeting Lisa's needs that he had forgotten he was allowed to have his own. He had given up his friends, his hobbies, and his independence because he thought that's what a good boyfriend was supposed to do. I don't even know who I am anymore, David admitted. I've been so busy being what Lisa needs that I've lost myself. Dr. Martinez helped David understand that healthy relationships required balance. Both people needed to be whole individuals who chose to be together, not to broken people trying to complete each other. David had been trying to fill a hole in Lisa's life, but he had been using her neediness to fill a hole in his own life too. Lisa isn't the monster you thought she was, Dr. Martinez said gently. She's a person with deep emotional wounds who learned that clinging to someone was the only way to feel safe. But you're not her savior either. You're a person who learned that being needed was the only way to feel valuable. David left that session feeling shaken, but also strangely relieved. For the first time, he understood why the relationship had felt so wrong even though it had also felt so right. He and Lisa had been feeding each other's worst instincts, creating a cycle of dependence and control that was destroying both of them. The hardest part was realizing that he couldn't save Lisa. He had spent over a year trying to be everything she needed, thinking that if he just loved her enough, she would heal. But Dr. Martinez helped him see that his attempts to fix Lisa were actually preventing her from learning to fix herself. You can't love someone into being healthy, Dr. Martinez said, and you can't build your self-worth on someone else's neediness. Both of you deserve better than that. David knew she was right, but it didn't make the truth any less painful. He had to accept that he wasn't the hero of this story, and Lisa wasn't the villain. They were both broken people who had found each other and created something toxic together. The question now was whether either of them was strong enough to break the cycle. The weeks following David's breakthrough in therapy were the hardest of his life. He couldn't look at Lisa the same way anymore. Every time she asked him detailed questions about his day, or got upset when he didn't respond to her texts immediately, David saw the pattern clearly. But more importantly, he saw his own role in maintaining it. David realized he had been getting a drug-like rush from being Lisa's emotional lifeline. When she was upset and only he could calm her down, he felt powerful and necessary. When she chose him over her friends, family, and other interests, he felt special and important. He had been just as addicted to the dynamic as she was. The revelation was devastating. David had spent months thinking he was the victim of Lisa's neediness, but now he understood that he had been feeding her addiction because it fed his own need to feel valuable. Every time he dropped everything to comfort her, every time he changed his plans to accommodate her fears, he was reinforcing the very behavior that was destroying both of them. I've been enabling her, David told Dr. Martinez during one of their sessions. I thought I was being supportive, but I was actually making her more dependent on me. Why do you think you needed to be so needed? Dr. Martinez asked. David had been thinking about this question for weeks. I think I've always measured my worth by how much other people need me. If someone can function without me, then I'm not important. Dr. Martinez nodded. And what happens when someone becomes too dependent on you? I start to feel trapped, David admitted. But I also feel important. It's like I'm drowning. But I'm also the hero saving someone else from drowning. David began to see how his childhood had shaped this pattern. His parents' divorce had taught him that relationships were fragile and that he needed to work hard to keep people from leaving. His mother's emotional neediness had taught him that being helpful was how he earned love. In every relationship since then, David had unconsciously sought out people who needed fixing. Lisa wasn't the first person I tried to save, David realized. I've been doing this my whole life. Dr. Martinez helped David understand that his attraction to Lisa's intensity wasn't romantic love. It was codependency. He had been drawn to her desperation because it made him feel needed and important. But healthy love wasn't about being someone's entire world. It was about the whole people choosing to share their lives together. Real love requires boundaries, Dr. Martinez explained. Both people need to be able to exist as individuals. What you and Lisa have isn't love, it's mutual addiction. David started to see Lisa's behavior from a completely different perspective. She wasn't a monster or a manipulator. She was a deeply wounded person who had learned that clinging to someone was the only way to feel safe. Her constant need for reassurance, her jealousy, and her fear of abandonment all made sense when David understood her history. Lisa had grown up with parents who were emotionally unavailable and critical. She had learned early that love was conditional and that people left when they found something better. Her desperate need to control David's every interaction wasn't about being possessive. It was about being terrified of being abandoned again. She's not evil, David said during one session. She's just scared, and you're not her savior. Dr. Martinez replied, you're someone who learned that being needed was the only way to feel valuable. David began to feel genuine empathy for Lisa for the first time in months. He could see how much pain she was in, how exhausting it must be to live in constant fear of abandonment. But he also realized that his attempts to ease her pain had only made it worse. Every time David reassured Lisa instead of setting boundaries, he confirmed her belief that she couldn't trust him to stay without constant monitoring. Every time he canceled plans to avoid her upset, he reinforced her fear that the relationship was fragile and required constant maintenance. I thought I was being loving, David said, but I was actually feeding her worst fears. The hardest part was accepting that he couldn't fix Lisa. David had spent over a year trying to love her into being healthy, thinking that if he just provided enough reassurance and support, she would eventually feel secure. But Dr. Martinez helped him see that his constant rescuing was actually preventing Lisa from learning to manage her own emotions. You can't do the work for her, Dr. Martinez explained. Every time you take responsibility for her feelings, you're telling her that she's not capable of handling them herself. David realized he had been infantilizing Lisa in his attempts to help her. He had been treating her like she was too fragile to handle disappointment, conflict, or independence. In trying to protect her from difficult emotions, he had been preventing her from growing and healing. I've been keeping her stuck, David said with horror. I thought I was helping, but I was actually keeping her from getting better. Dr. Martinez helped David understand that both he and Lisa needed to learn to be whole individuals before they could have a healthy relationship with anyone. David needed to find his self-worth in something other than being needed, and Lisa needed to learn that she could survive without constant reassurance. This pattern will continue until one of you decides to break it, Dr. Martinez said. It takes courage to stop playing the roles you've been playing. David knew she was right, but the thought of changing scared him. Being needed by Lisa had become such a big part of his identity that he wasn't sure who he would be without it. If he wasn't Lisa's rescuer, who was he? I'm afraid that if I stop being what she needs, she'll leave, David admitted. And I'm afraid that if she becomes independent, she won't need me anymore, he added quietly. Dr. Martinez helped David see that both fears were about control. He had been staying in the relationship not because it was healthy, but because Lisa's dependence on him felt safer than risking a relationship with someone who didn't need him desperately. Healthy relationships involve risk, Dr. Martinez said. You have to trust that someone will choose to stay with you because they want to, not because they need to. David started to understand that his relationship with Lisa wasn't really about Lisa at all. It was about his own fears of abandonment and his need to feel important. He had been using her neediness to avoid facing his own insecurities and working on his own emotional health. I've been just as sick as she is, David realized. I just hit it better. The work of changing these patterns was exhausting. David had to learn to sit with his own discomfort instead of rushing to fix Lisa's feelings. He had to practice saying no to her requests for constant reassurance and allowing her to manage her own emotions. Most importantly, he had to start building his self-worth on something other than being needed. It was during this process that David made a difficult decision. He realized that he and Lisa couldn't heal together because their patterns were too entrenched. Every interaction triggered their old roles, and neither of them could break free while they were still together. I think I need to end the relationship, David told Dr. Martinez one day. Not because I don't love her, but because I love her too much to keep her trapped in this cycle. Dr. Martinez nodded. What would that look like for you? I would have to let her face her fears of abandonment. Instead of constantly reassuring her, I would have to stop being her emotional crutch and let her learn to stand on her own. David knew it would be the hardest thing he had ever done, but he also knew it was the most loving thing he could do for both of them. They both deserved the chance to become whole individuals, and that couldn't happen while they were feeding each other's worst instincts. The conversation with Lisa was heartbreaking, but David finally understood that sometimes love meant letting go. He wasn't leaving because he didn't care about her. He was leaving because he cared too much to keep enabling her pain. For the first time in his life, David was choosing to be alone. Rather than settling for an unhealthy relationship, it was terrifying, but it was also the beginning of real healing for both of them.